My dad skipped my 30th birthday dinner, but when the news revealed I had won a $24 jackpot, he texted, "Come home tonight, family emergency." I arrived with the eviction notice. The restaurant closed at 11 and I bought the ticket at the gas station on the way home. $2. I picked my own numbers because my grandmother Estelle always said the machine picks were for people who did not care enough to choose. The ticket went on the kitchen counter next to the plate of cake I had cut for myself 4 hours earlier. The cake was from a box. The frosting was still tacky because I had iced it at 9 when it became clear that nobody else was coming. 8 place settings at a restaurant downtown. A reservation under Mercer, party of 8, 7 o'clock. Nobody came. Not my father, not Odette, not Xavier, not Uncle Ray, not the cousins, not my biological mother Renata. 7:15, 7:30, 7:45. The bread basket went stale. The waiter stopped asking if I wanted to order appetizers and started looking at me the way people look at someone they feel sorry for but cannot help. I pulled my phone out twice. No missed calls, no texts saying running late. Nothing. The restaurant was filling up around me, and every table had 2 or more people, and mine had 1. And the empty chairs were louder than anything in that room. Then the door opened. Dante Reeves. 31 years old, best friend since 7th grade, the only person in my life who shows up because he wants to, and not because blood or obligation tells him to. He saw the empty chairs and his face gave away nothing. No pity, no awkwardness. He sat down, picked up both menus and said, "All right, birthday boy, 2 menus, no sharing. We are ordering everything on the left side." We did. For 2 hours, we ate like 2 people who had decided that an empty table was just a table with more room. Dante ordered a steak he could barely afford, and I ordered pasta, and we talked about nothing important, because the most important thing happening at that table was the fact that he was sitting at it. He paid his half and argued about the tip until I let him leave 30% because he said turning 30 meant you could not be cheap about gratuity anymore. In the parking lot, he said one thing. "Your grandmother would have been here." He was right. Estelle Mercer would have been the first one seated and the last to leave, and she would have brought a card with a $20 bill inside, same as every year since I was 6. But Estelle died 4 years ago, and the seat she would have taken stayed empty, along with 6 others. At the time, I believed nobody came because they were busy or forgetful or did not care enough about a line cook's 30th birthday to make the drive. I was wrong about all of it, but I would not learn the real reason for 9 more days. The gas station, the $2 ticket, the kitchen counter, the lights off. I did not check the numbers that night. Sunday morning, coffee, phone. The first 4 numbers matched, which had happened once before, and won me $12. The 5th matched, the 6th matched, $24 million. My hands went flat on the counter and stayed there until the coffee got cold. I put the ticket in an envelope, wrote the date on the outside, and drove to the lottery office Monday morning. 6 days of paperwork. A financial advisor named Mitchell who wore a tie even on phone calls and spoke about tax brackets the way chefs speak about seasoning, precisely, repeatedly, and with the assumption that getting it wrong would ruin everything. The lump sum payout after federal and state taxes came to roughly $14.4 million. That number sat in my head for 3 days before it started to feel real, and even then, it only felt real when I walked into the restaurant for my shift on Tuesday and looked at the line and the tickets and the heat lamps and realized that every minute I stood at that station was now a choice instead of a necessity. I told Dante. I told my financial advisor. Nobody else. For 7 days, I went to work, cooked my shifts, clocked out, drove home, and sat in my apartment thinking about the duplex. The restaurant did not know yet. My sous chef asked me why I was so quiet on Wednesday, and I told him I was tired, which was true in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. The kitchen moved the way it always moved. Tickets coming in, plates going out, the controlled chaos that I had built my adult life inside of, because it was the one place where doing good work got you more good work, and nobody pretended the rules were different than what they were. The duplex sat 12 minutes from my apartment. My grandmother left it to me because she believed I would take care of it, and for 4 years I had. The property taxes came out of my checking account every quarter. The insurance premiums came out every 6 months. When the roof leaked last spring, I paid $4,200 to a contractor named Morales and never asked Leland for a penny because asking would have turned into a conversation about how he was already doing me a favor by living there. And I had learned by 29 that some conversations with my father were not worth starting. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary. Leland moved in 3 years ago after retiring from a route driving job that paid well, but left him with nothing saved. Odette's spending ran through whatever came in faster than it arrived. And when Leland asked to stay in the duplex for 6 months, I said yes, because that is what you do when your father asks. And you are 27 and still believe that saying yes to your family is the same as being a good son. 6 months became a year became two became three, and somewhere in that time the arrangement stopped being a favor and became an expectation, and the expectation became something Leland believed he was owed, and the thing he believed he was owed became something he called his house when he talked about it to other people. I should have said no the first year. I know that now. On day 8, the State Lottery Commission published my name. Local news ran a segment that evening. A line cook at a downtown restaurant had won $24 million. They used my employee photo from the restaurant website. At 9:47 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from my father. Family emergency. Come home tonight. 23 minutes after the news aired. Not a phone call, a text. If your son is in danger, you call. If you want his money, you text. I almost drove to his house that night. My keys were in my hand and the engine was running, and every instinct built over 30 years of answering when Leland Mercer said, "Come," pulled me toward the driveway. Then I read the text again. 9:47 p.m. 23 minutes. A text, not a call. The keys went back on the hook. If you have ever received a message from family that arrived the exact moment you became useful to them, you understand what that text felt like. Make sure you are subscribed to Family Secret Tales, because the emergency my father invented that night is not what he thought it was. Day 9. I called Xavier. My brother is 33, 3 years older than me, and he has spent his entire adult life starting things he cannot finish. A food truck that lasted 4 months. A landscaping side business that dissolved after 1 summer. His latest venture was a catering company that had been hemorrhaging cash for 8 months, funded by an equipment lease he could not afford, in vendor relationships he could not maintain. I called to tell him about the lottery because despite everything, he is my brother, and he should hear it from me before he heard it from someone else. Xavier already knew. Dad told me last night, "Congrats, man." He also said sorry about your birthday. I thought you canceled it. My hand tightened on the phone. Outside the window, a neighbor was loading grocery bags into a car, and the normalcy of the scene felt absurd next to the sentence I had just heard. I never canceled the dinner, Xavier. Xavier went quiet for 3 seconds. Dad called me the Tuesday before. He said you changed your mind about the restaurant. I hung up and called Uncle Ray. Ray is Leland's brother, a retired electrician who has never missed a family event unless weather made the roads unsafe. Ray answered on the second ring and told me the exact same thing. Leland called Tuesday, said the dinner was off. Quinn changed his mind. No need to drive down. Renata was next. Same story, same lie. Same Tuesday phone call from a man who decided that erasing his son's birthday was easier than having an uncomfortable meal. 5 calls made by my father the Tuesday before my 30th birthday. 5 lies told to 5 people who would have been at that table. Every person on the guest list except Dante, because Dante was not family and Leland did not have his number. My father did not skip my birthday. He killed it. He picked up the phone 5 separate times and told 5 separate people that his son had canceled a dinner his son had spent 2 weeks planning. The bread basket that went stale, and the waiter whose face shifted from professional to pitying over 45 minutes, in the 7 empty chairs that made me feel like the problem in a room full of strangers having better evenings than mine. All of that was my father's work. Every minute I sat alone at that table was a minute he engineered. Xavier mentioned the reason the way you mentioned something you have never thought about twice. Dad was weird about you inviting Mom. He said something to Odette about it, and she got upset. You know how it is. I had invited Renata, my biological mother, to my own birthday dinner. My mother, the woman who raised me until she and Leland split when I was 8, Leland did not want Odette to discover that I still had a relationship with her. Rather than pulling me aside and asking me to uninvite one person, which would have been a hard conversation but an honest one, he went behind my back and canceled the entire dinner without telling me. He called every name on the list and said Quinn changed his mind. He let me sit at that table alone and believed I would never find out. Then 14 days later, he stood in my house and used my loneliness at that table as a weapon, saying nobody wanted to come to my birthday. He weaponized a wound he created. He sacrificed my 30th birthday to protect his second marriage from one uncomfortable dinner. But anger alone would not have been enough. Anger fades. Anger negotiates with itself and talks you into one more chance, one more conversation, one more attempt to believe the man who raised you is better than the worst thing he has done. What tipped me from angry to certain happened the same morning as Xavier's phone call, and it started with an envelope I had been ignoring for 9 days. It had been taped to my apartment door the night of the birthday. I had carried it inside without opening it, dropped it on the counter, and left it there while I dealt with lottery offices and financial advisors and the slow-motion earthquake of becoming a millionaire. The return address was a law office, estate of Estelle Mercer. Inside was a birthday card in my grandmother's handwriting. She had written it before she died and left it with her executor with specific instructions: deliver to Quinn Mercer on his 30th birthday. Happy 30th, Quinn. The duplex is yours now. Grandma's only rule: use it to build your life, not to carry someone else's. Love, Grandma Estelle. A $20 bill was folded inside. Same denomination as every card she sent since I was 6 years old. 24 years of $20 bills. And this was the last one she would ever give. I read the card standing at the counter. The apartment was quiet. The cake was still in the fridge. The only birthday card I received that was not from Dante came from a woman who had been dead for 4 years and still managed to show up for me more clearly than the living father who slept in her house every night. Estelle wrote those words knowing that one day I would need permission to stop carrying someone else's weight. She did not know the specifics, the subletting, the birthday sabotage, the text message timed to a news segment. She just knew her son, and she knew that whatever Leland built, it would eventually rest on the back of whoever was willing to hold it. Her card was not a gift. It was a set of instructions. I folded it, slid it into my jacket pocket, and left it there. It stayed against my chest for the next 5 days. Estelle's handwriting, pressed against my ribs, had more authority over what I did next than anything Leland Mercer had ever said to me in 30 years of being his son. That afternoon, I hired Sylvia Thorne, a real estate attorney. For the first time in my life, I could afford one. That fact alone, the fact that the only thing standing between me and legal enforcement of my own property rights for 3 years was money, sat in my stomach the entire drive to her office. I explained the duplex. My grandmother left it to me 4 years ago. My father moved into Unit A 3 years ago rent-free because I was 27 and earning $47,000 a year and did not know how to tell my own father no. The deed was in my name. I paid the taxes, the insurance, and the repairs. Leland paid nothing. Sylvia listened the way good attorneys listen, without interrupting, without reacting, writing down facts in an order that would matter later in a document someone would have to sign. When I finished, she asked one question. Do you want him out? Yes. 30-day notice. Month-to-month tenancy? No lease. Standard process. Is there anything else about the property I should know? There was, but I did not know it yet. And what I found 2 days later turned the eviction from a decision into an obligation. Day 10. I drove to the duplex to look at the property before serving the notice. The decision to evict my own father had been sitting in my chest for 24 hours, and it felt heavier with every mile. Part of me still wanted to believe there was a version of this where Leland apologized and meant it, and the duplex arrangement could continue with boundaries instead of betrayal. That part of me lasted until I drove past the building and saw a dark blue sedan in Unit B's driveway with a pile of leaves pressed against the rear tire, a car that had not moved in weeks. I almost did not stop. The car could have belonged to a visitor, a friend, anyone, but Unit B had been empty since my grandmother died 4 years ago. Nobody should have been parking there. Nobody should have been living there. and the leaf pile said this car had been sitting in that driveway long enough for autumn to collect around it. I pulled in and knocked. A man answered, mid-40s, coffee in hand. "Can I help you?" "My name is Quinn Mercer. I own this building." His face shifted. "I am Craig. I pay Leland $1,100 a month. Have for about 2 years." There it was. 24 months of rent, collected from my property, deposited into my father's account, spent on my father's life. While I worked 50-hour weeks at the restaurant and pulled double shifts to cover a car payment, my father was collecting income from a building I owned and paying nothing to live in it. Craig was not the problem. He thought he was renting from a legitimate landlord. He showed me the Venmo receipts on his phone, every first of the month, paid to Leland Mercer. He was a good tenant who had been lied to by the same man who lied to me. I thanked Craig and told him my attorney would be in touch. He looked relieved, which told me something about Leland as a landlord that no receipt ever could. At Sylvia's office, I laid the Venmo screenshots on her desk next to the property deed she had already pulled from county records. My name, sole owner, no other parties. Your father had no authority to lease that unit. The arrangement is void. You have a valid claim for unjust enrichment, $26,400. She prepared 3 documents: the eviction notice, a demand letter for the collected rent, and a notification to Craig that his tenancy under Leland was unauthorized, but that Quinn was open to a proper lease. I brought my own records too: roof repair receipts, property tax payments, insurance premiums. Every dollar that went into that building for 4 years came from me. Sylvia looked at the receipts. You could have done this 2 years ago if you could have afforded me. 2 years ago, I was behind on my car payment. And now? Now I have 14 million reasons to do what my grandmother told me to do. If you are still listening, stay with this story on Family Secret Tales, because what happened on day 14 is why I'm telling it. My father texted me about a family emergency. He expected a checkbook. What arrived was a manila envelope and the worst night of his life. The 4 days between Sylvia's office and day 14 were the longest of my life. The documents sat in the manila envelope on my kitchen table, and I looked at them every morning over coffee and every night before bed. An eviction notice for my own father. A demand letter for $26,400. A formal notification that the man who had been calling himself a landlord in my building had no legal right to collect a dime. Every time I looked at the envelope, I heard 2 voices. Leland's voice saying, "Pick up your little bag and find a motel," and Estelle's voice saying, "Use it to build your life, not to carry someone else's." By day 14, only one of those voices still had any authority over what I did next. Day 14. Evening. The porch light was on in Unit A. Xavier's car was already there. The pitch was ready. All they needed was the wallet. Dante was parked across the street because I asked him to be. I sat in the car with the manila envelope on the passenger seat and Estelle's card against my ribs. The duplex looked the same as it always had. 2-story shared driveway. The porch railing Leland had painted last spring, as if a coat of paint was the same as a mortgage payment. 4 years of property taxes, 4 years of insurance premiums, 4 years of every repair bill that came through. And Leland's contribution was a railing that was already starting to peel. I got out of the car. Leland opened the door before I knocked. He was wearing a clean shirt, the kind you put on when you are expecting company you want something from. His face held an expression I had seen 100 times, the controlled welcome of a man who has already decided what the conversation will be about before the other person sits down. "Good. Come in. We need to talk." The living room was the same as it had always been. Odette's furniture, Leland's recliner, a television stand I had assembled for them 2 Christmases ago. Xavier was at the kitchen table with a legal pad covered in numbers. He had been rehearsing the pitch in his head, and the moment I walked in, he started talking the way someone talks when they are afraid that silence will give the other person time to say no. "Quinn, the catering business is in trouble. The equipment lease is 90 days past due and the vendor accounts are frozen. I need $40,000 to clear the balance. Dad said you would understand." $40,000. That was the emergency. Not a heart attack, not a fire, not a hospital room or a car accident, or anything that would justify the word emergency in a text to your estranged son 23 minutes after his name appeared on the local news. Xavier's business debt. And my father had used the word emergency the way a fisherman uses bait, the right word on the hook, and the fish comes to the surface. I looked at Xavier, then at Leland, then at Odette, standing in the hallway entrance with her arms folded, watching me the way you watch a transaction you have already decided the outcome of. That is the emergency? Leland stepped forward. Your brother needs help, Quinn. That is what family does. I set the manila envelope on the table between Xavier's legal pad and a glass of water nobody had touched. The envelope was thin, one document inside. It looked like nothing. It was everything. Leland picked it up, turned it over, opened the flap, read the first line, his mouth compressed, jaw locking. He read the second line. His eyes came up slow. An eviction notice? You win $24 million and the first thing you do is come to your father's house with an eviction notice? This is who you are, Quinn. A line cook with lottery money. Still the same kid who sat at a restaurant table for 2 hours because nobody wanted to show up to his birthday? Money does not fix that. Your brother would have written a check for the family without being asked. You have to be dragged here with a fake emergency. That tells you everything. He said that standing 4 feet from me, in a house I owned, holding a document with my name at the top as the property owner and his name at the bottom as the tenant being asked to leave. And the sentence about my birthday landed exactly where he aimed it. It landed hard. He had no idea that the next 3 minutes of his life were going to turn that sentence into the worst thing he ever said out loud. Because I knew something he did not know I knew. And the knowing had been sitting in my stomach for 5 days like a stone. Odette moved into the doorway behind him. Your grandmother should have left this house to her own son, not to a grandchild who was not even living here. Leland maintained this property. He painted it. He fixed the plumbing. And now you want to throw him out? What kind of son does that? I looked at Odette. Who paid for the roof repair last year? I did. $4,200 to a contractor named Morales. Receipt in this folder. The property taxes come from my bank every year. The insurance premiums come from my bank every year. When the breaker panel needed updating 2 years ago, I hired the electrician and paid him the same week. Every dollar that went into keeping this building standing came from a line cook's paycheck, Odette. Leland painted a porch railing. That is not maintaining a property. That is decorating someone else's house. Xavier's pen went down on the legal pad. The numbers he had itemized stopped mattering. And Unit B, I said, turning to Leland. Who is living in Unit B? The color rose in Leland's neck. His mouth tightened. That is none of your business. It is my building, Dad. My name on the deed, my taxes funding it, my insurance covering it. A man named Craig has been paying you $1,100 a month for 2 years. $26,400 from my property. I have the Venmo records. My attorney has the deed. You had no authority to lease that unit. You did not own it. You do not own anything in this building. Leland tried to recover. Craig needed a place. The unit was sitting empty. I was doing what made sense. What made sense was collecting $1,100 a month from my property and putting every dollar in your pocket. What made sense was living rent-free in one unit and running a rental business out of the other, on a building where my name is on every piece of paper filed at the county recorder. Odette spoke from the doorway. He was looking after the property, Quinn. Someone had to. He was profiting from it. There is a difference. And every receipt in this folder proves which one he was doing. Leland's hand moved to the eviction notice and pressed it flat, palm down, fingers spread, as if holding the paper still enough might undo what was written on it. He swallowed, and the second time was audible across the kitchen. His eyes went to Xavier for help. Xavier was looking at the grain of the table. His left hand gripped the chair back, and his knuckles went white. Odette took one step toward the hallway. I almost let the birthday go. Xavier had mentioned it so casually on the phone, like a weather report, like a father canceling his son's birthday was something that happened to everybody. The casualness was worse than the sabotage. But Leland had just stood in my house and told me nobody wanted to come to my birthday, and that sentence could not go unanswered. Xavier, who told you my birthday dinner was canceled? Xavier looked up. Dad called me the Tuesday before. Uncle Ray? Dad called him too. I turned to Leland. You called every person on the guest list. Xavier, Uncle Ray, Mom, the cousins. You told them all I canceled. Nobody came because you made sure of it. The only person who showed up was Dante because you did not have his number. And then you stood here 30 seconds ago and said nobody wanted to come to my birthday. Nobody could come. Because of you. Leland's voice came out tight and flat. That dinner was going to cause problems. For who? For me? I planned it. I reserved the table. I invited the people I wanted to see. The only problem that dinner caused was for you, because Odette would have had to sit across from Renata, and you decided your comfort mattered more than my birthday. Odette's arms uncrossed for the first time since the conversation started. She looked at Leland. He did not look back. Xavier's head dropped. His hand moved the legal pad aside, slowly. The way you clear space on a table when you realize the meeting you prepared for is not the meeting you are in. You have lived in my house for 3 years without paying rent. I kept that deal. What you did not tell me is that you rented Unit B to a tenant for $1,100 a month and kept every dollar. You paid no rent. You collected rent on a building you do not own. You called 5 people the week before my birthday and told them I canceled because you did not want your second wife to sit across from your first one at a dinner that was never about either of them. It was my 30th birthday, and tonight the emergency you texted about 23 minutes after the news showed my face is Xavier's business debt. There is no emergency. There was never an emergency. You needed a wallet and you thought $24 million would make me too guilty to say no. Leland's breathing went shallow. His weight shifted from one foot to the other and back. The eviction notice crinkled under his palm. I looked at him and said the line that had been sitting in my chest since the night Dante and I ate alone at a table set for 8. You canceled my birthday so nobody would come. Then you texted emergency when you needed money. Turns out the emergency was me finally showing up. Nobody spoke. The eviction is 30 days. The demand for every dollar of rent you collected is with my attorney. Xavier's $40,000 is not coming from me, and the next time you think about calling me for an emergency, remember the table I sat at for 2 hours on my birthday. 8 chairs, 7 empty. That is what showing up for someone who does not show up for you looks like. I am done doing it. I picked up my jacket. Estelle's card pressed against my chest as I put it on. You have 30 days. The door closed behind me. The night air hit my face and the tension I had been carrying in my shoulders for 14 days let go about an inch. The porch steps went by under my feet and the driveway concrete was cold through my shoes and Dante's car was across the street with the engine running and the headlights off. He did not ask how it went. He did not need to. He pulled out behind me and followed me home, and we sat on the hood of his car in the parking lot for 20 minutes without talking. Then Dante said, "She would have been proud of you tonight." He meant Estelle. I nodded. That was enough. That was always enough with Dante. He did not need the full story. He had been sitting across from me at an empty table 2 weeks ago, and now he was sitting on the hood of a car while I came down from the hardest conversation I had ever had with my father. And both times his presence said the same thing. You are not doing this alone. For the next 6 days, nothing happened. No calls from Leland, no text from Xavier, no visit from Odette. The eviction clock ticked and my phone stayed quiet in a way that felt less like peace and more like the silence before a second attempt. I knew Leland was not finished. Men like my father do not lose a room and accept it. They find another room and try again. 6 days later, Leland tried his last move. He called Uncle Ray. The plan was straightforward. Ray was the family elder, the retired electrician who had fixed every broken thing in the Mercer family for 30 years. If Ray called Quinn and told him to pull the eviction, Quinn would fold. That was Leland's calculation. He was wrong about every part of it. Uncle Ray did not call me first. He drove past the duplex. He saw Craig's car in Unit B's driveway. He had never noticed it before because he had never had a reason to look. Now he did. He sat at the end of the street for 2 full minutes, doing the same arithmetic I had done 10 days earlier, and then he picked up his phone. But instead of calling Leland back, he called me. "Quinn, your father has someone living in your unit. Did you know?" That is part of why I served the notice. A long silence then. How long? 2 years. Ray exhaled, slow and heavy. I am not asking anyone to choose sides, Uncle Ray. I am asking to live in my grandmother's house without my father renting it out behind my back. Ray was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lower, the voice of a man who was recalculating someone he thought he had figured out decades ago. You do what you need to do, Quinn. He hung up. He did not call Leland. The appeal that was supposed to pressure me into surrendering had done the opposite. It had sent the one person who might have stayed neutral directly to the evidence. And what he saw made choosing unnecessary. The facts chose for him. 2 days later, Leland made one more call. This one cost him something he did not know he still had. He called Renata, my biological mother, the woman he divorced 16 years ago. The woman whose name on a guest list was so threatening to his second marriage that he erased his son's birthday to keep her away from a dinner table. He had not spoken to her in over a decade. But desperation opens phone books you thought you closed for good, and Leland was running out of numbers. Renata let him talk. She let him say misunderstanding and family, and Quinn is being unreasonable without interrupting, because Renata has always let people finish their sentences before she ends the conversation. Then she spoke. He invited me to his birthday dinner, Leland, his 30th. He wanted his mother there. You called me and told me he canceled, and I believed you, and he sat at that restaurant table without his mother because I took your word for it. He got this from me, you know, the part that eventually stops forgiving. You should have come to dinner. She hung up. Leland called back. Voicemail, a second time. Same. Renata had reached the part that stops. She was not starting again. The following Sunday, Renata called me. She did not apologize because it was not her fault. She said, I would have been there, Quinn, if I had known. I told her I knew that. She asked if I was eating well. I told her I was a line cook, and eating well was the one thing I could always manage. She laughed, and it was the first time anyone connected to my family had laughed about anything to do with my birthday, and it came from the woman Leland had tried hardest to erase from the guest list. The last person to weigh in was Gus, Leland's poker buddy for 20 years. Tuesday nights, the one social ritual Leland had maintained through 2 marriages and a lifetime of burning every other relationship he touched. Gus heard the full story from Uncle Ray, who told it without editorializing, which made the facts hit harder because they needed no help. You lived in the kid's house, rented out his unit, pocketed 26 grand, canceled his birthday so your wife would not meet your ex, and then texted him emergency when you wanted money? Leland, what did you think was going to happen? Leland tried. Gus, you do not have the full picture. I have enough of the picture. The boy paid for your roof. He paid your taxes. He let you live rent-free. And your thank you was a fake emergency text 23 minutes after his name hit the news. That is the only picture there is. Gus did not call again. The weekly poker game that had been part of Leland's life for 2 decades continued the following Tuesday at Ray's house. Nobody told Leland the location had changed. Nobody needed to. The absence of an invitation said everything a phone call would have said, and it said it louder because silence from a 20-year friend is not something you misinterpret. It is something you sit with alone in a guest room that is not yours, until the weight of it tells you what every person in your life has been trying to tell you for months. Day 44. Leland's 30 days expired. He loaded 4 suitcases into Odette's car on a Tuesday morning, while the young couple I had approved for Unit A stood on the sidewalk waiting to sign their lease. They watched a man carry luggage out of the unit they were about to move into. Leland did not look at them. He loaded the last box himself, carried it down the porch steps of a building that bore my name on every document filed with the county, put it in the trunk, and drove 20 minutes west to the guest room at Odette's sister's house. Craig stayed in Unit B under a proper lease signed directly with me, and the rent that had been flowing into Leland's account for 2 years went where it belonged. I approved a young couple for Unit A the following week. They walked through the unit and asked about the neighborhood, and had no idea that the man who lived there before them had collected rent from the unit next door while paying nothing himself. Xavier's catering company closed 8 weeks after the confrontation. The equipment lease defaulted. The vendor accounts went to collections. He took a job at a restaurant supply warehouse, steady work and honest pay, and stopped calling me because the last time we spoke, I was handing his father an eviction notice, and he was sitting at a table with a legal pad full of numbers that did not matter anymore. Leland sits in that guest room now. The demand letter from Sylvia's office is on his dresser, still sealed 3 weeks after delivery. Opening it would mean admitting the money was never his, and admitting that would require a version of Leland Mercer that does not exist yet and might never. His phone has not rung in 4 days. Ray does not call. Gus does not call. Renata does not answer. The duplex is 14 minutes away, and someone else is painting the kitchen in Unit A, and Craig is paying rent to the person whose name was always on the deed. Leland's name is on nothing. His poker night happens on a night he no longer knows about. The word emergency sits in his text history like a receipt for something he tried to buy and could not afford. Odette sits in the living room of her sister's house and watches television with the volume too high. She does not talk about the duplex. She does not talk about the receipts or the roof repair or the property taxes. She does not talk about the night her stepdaughter-in-law's cooking career was supposed to be the punchline and turned out to be the foundation everything was standing on. Odette has discovered, the way people discover things they should have known all along, that the house she lived in for 3 years belonged to the person her husband spent 3 years dismissing as a line cook who did not matter. My apartment is quiet. 2 bedrooms bought with cash the week after the lottery cleared. No furniture from anyone else's house. No recliner I assembled for someone who never said thank you. No television stand I put together on a Christmas afternoon while Leland watched football and Odette talked about things the duplex needed that she expected me to pay for. The space is mine in a way the duplex never felt, because ownership is not just a name on a deed. Ownership is being able to walk through your own front door without wondering what someone else has done behind it while you were at work. The restaurant offered me my old station back, and I told the chef I would come in on Saturdays because I liked the work. That is the difference Estelle would have understood. Choosing a kitchen is not the same as needing one. Estelle's birthday card is on my nightstand. The $20 bill is still inside. Her handwriting faces up. Use it to build your life, not to carry someone else's. Dante is coming over at 7 to watch the game. He will bring food he did not cook and opinions he did not earn, and he will sit on my couch the same way he sat across from me at that empty restaurant table, without needing to fill the silence with anything except the fact that he showed up. The 20 is still in the card. I will never spend it. Some money is not for buying things. Some money is for remembering who believed in you before anyone else thought you were worth believing in. If this story taught you something about the difference between the family that shows up and the family that sends a text when they need something, share it. And if you have not already, subscribe to Family Secret Tales. Some emergencies are real. Some are just the sound of someone realizing they cannot use you anymore.